Raider Nation, what's going on? It's Mitchell Renz, your host of the Raiders Report, with some breaking news. The Las Vegas Raiders are adding to the roster by going out and signing defensive tackle Leki Fotu. Coming up here on today's show, I'm going to tell you everything you need to know around Fotu and ultimately why I think the Raiders ended up getting this deal done. Here's my shtick, though. When the Raiders do something, you're going to get a video around it. Make sure you're subscribed. Make sure those notifications are turned on. If this is the first time that you're hearing about Fotu, I know for a Fotu that you are not subscribed to this channel, and I say that because this is a player that I talked about last week on Friday because he had a visit with the Silver and Black on March 20th, and I sat up here and I said, okay, why exactly would the Raiders be looking to add another defensive tackle? And I said that when you think about the deal that he ends up getting done, it was reported by Tom Pelissero. We don't have the contract details yet. Here's going to be the truth, though. It's going to be a one-year vet min style of deal. I'd be shocked if it was over $2 million. I'm not going to lie to you. But this adds a little bit more depth to the Raiders' interior. And the big name that I'm going to throw out there in terms of why I think this deal ended up getting done, I think it is a cheap John Jenkins style of replacement because you got Christian Wilkins, you got Adam Butler. Those are two players that I know that this organization has a lot of faith in. Outside of that, though, unproven young man in Matthew Butler, a unproven young man in John Ulalu. Though John Ulalu does have some upside to him, I don't see it in Butler. I don't see it with Manoa. And, you got Wilkins, you got Butler obviously in that. Tyree Wilson's a player that I think that they want to put out on the edge to almost be that Malcolm Kuntz, Caleb Von Chasen rotation. This year it could be Malcolm Kuntz and Tyree Wilson. But ultimately, this is not a big name type of dude, right? And the grade that you're going to see from me on today's show is going to be a grade based on a one-year vet min style of deal, and at the absolute max, it's going to be $2 million. So go down in the comments section, grade the signing of Leki Fotu, A, B, C, D, or F. I'm going to give this a D grade. Leki has not been a very good football player over the past few seasons, and you could see a few little odds and ends of why they maybe ended up doing this deal. To me, I look at this as more of what the Raiders are telling me that they're going to do in the NFL draft, more than I think that we should expect Leki Fotu to be a player that this team relies upon. He's a gigantic human being. He's 6'5", he's 335 pounds. When you think about a player like John Jenkins, also had that very similar style of build, big difference is Jenkins is 35. Fotu, I believe, is about 27, 28 years old, but Jenkins is still playing at a much better level that what Fotu has. The only reason why I'm going to sit up here and I'm going to say maybe I should give it a higher grade, and maybe this ends up being a much better move than what we're kind of sitting here thinking about right now, because I do believe in Rob Leonard. I do believe in Patrick Graham, but I'm looking at this deal right now as him more just being a depth piece, him more being a space eater, and him saving the Raiders a draft pick come 2025 NFL draft, which I'll kind of break down all of my reasons why I believe the Silver and Black did ultimately get this deal done with Leki Fotu. Before I get into that, though, huge shout out to our sponsor, PrizePicks. Yo, this past weekend was absolutely electric, man. Being able to watch all the awesome college basketball games. I don't care if whoever you picked. Maybe you were picking Duke. Maybe you picked Florida. I'll tell you what, that Florida game was making me sweat a little bit. But luckily, I was able to put some extra money in my pocket, and you guys can too with America's #1 daily fantasy sports app out there. If you're like, Mitch, how do I get it? You got to pick more, you got to pick less at prizepicks.com/CLNS. Just make sure that you use code CLNS. So let's say when you deposit some money here, and depending on how much money you want to be able to deposit, I do want to show you my season long, more or less, for the Las Vegas Raiders. And I'm showing you this because they have Geno Smith available. They have Brock Bowers for season long. This is not a lineup that you can do because you have to pick players from two different teams. You can't pick the same player twice in your lineup. So that is very important to throw out there. But PrizePicks has been a long-time sponsor here on the Raiders Report, and I think that you guys would honestly really enjoy it too. So if you're trying to run your game all season long on PrizePicks, telling you, prizepicks.com/CLNS. Just make sure that you use code CLNS. All right, so coming up here is why I think that the Raiders ultimately ended up getting this deal done with Fotu. I mentioned it before. Cheap John Jenkins replacement. The Raiders this offseason have proved to me that they are going to try to win in the trenches, but they're also trying to get their guys right. What do I mean by that? They're trying to put Max Crosby in the best situation possible. They're trying to put Christian Wilkins, best situation possible. They're trying to get Malcolm Kuntz, Tyree Wilson. Those are the players that they have a lot of value of. It needs to work with those guys. When you bring in somebody like Fotu, who is a space eater, I would tell them, just try to take on double teams. Just try to take on double teams to free up other opportunities for some of these other playmakers, because when you look at the PFF grades, they're not good, right? And I'm not going to sit up here and I'm going to try to spin it for you. It's not been a good career for Leki, and that's just the bottom line. But as I always say on this, and as Chugs and I always clap to, like, I believe in Chip Kelly. I believe in Rob Leonard, and you should believe in Rob Leonard as well. Like, Caleb on Chasen is a great example last season of why you should believe in a Rob Leonard. Honestly, dude, Adam Butler having essentially a career season at age 30 is a reason why you should believe in Rob Leonard. And the Raiders' defensive line, it's no doubt their strongest unit. Like, waking up this morning, if you tell me what part of that defense is by far the strongest unit, it's the defensive line with your defensive tackles and your edge. What I potentially think is this, like, because you go out and you add Fotu, the Raiders obviously clearly value the trenches, which I love to see, but it also makes me wonder, is this going to be something that I think a lot of Raiders fans thought that this team could add a defensive tackle in the draft? I don't think that they're looking to add another defensive tackle. I think it's Leki Fotu, the people they have on their squad right now, and those are going to be some of the names that you hear rolling forward. Now, I always say this. There's got to be a coaching connection. And there's not a huge coaching connection for Leki in this one, but I do know for a fact that Pete Carroll, John Spytek do really value the minds of Marcus Robinson, also Joe Woods, but especially Marcus Robinson, who is the Raiders defensive backs coach. And Fotu was on the Cardinals from 2020 to 2022 when Robertson was there. Obviously, it's two totally different, cornerback to defensive tackle, but you still can see a player up close and personal. The other connection that I do wonder, because this team does really value the ability to see players in college. Chip Kelly went up against them in 2018, 2019. Because Leki ended up playing at Utah. Chip Kelly was with UCLA from 2018 to 2023. Maybe Fotu had a few good games or made Chip Kelly go, wow, that's somebody that I got to go ahead and just keep a little bit of a tab on. The final thing is this. There are other draft needs for the Raiders. And when you miss out on a Christian Ellis like the Raiders did today, when you have so many other pieces that you're trying to fill, and the Raiders, let's be honest, do still have some pieces out there, and they've been trying to plug and play guys on a cheap matter. When you do that, that tells me that I believe that the Raiders aren't going to draft a defensive tackle, that they're going to use those 9 picks for other areas of the draft, because yes, defensive tackle is a certain position, but it's also not a very deep defensive tackle class. And the fact that this team has met with only one. They have met with only one defensive tackle at the combine is what they did. And that was Mason Graham. Mason Graham is going to be a top 10 pick. So, when you think of Mason Graham, maybe they could add Graham into the equation. But then I think that kind of takes away some of the things that they did with Adam Butler. I think it kind of takes away some of these other opportunities for some of those other players on that defensive line. But in my opinion, and I said this last week, if the Raiders end up signing Leki Fotu, what they are trying to do is add some big body guys on the interior to really just show the top guys are the ones that are the most important. But in terms of looking at other defensive tackles in the draft, I really do not see the Raiders looking to add to that position. So I'm not saying Leki's going to be the reason why they don't draft Mason Graham, but going out and adding Leki Fotu is why you don't add a defensive tackle day 3 of the NFL draft. So do you think that the Raiders are going to draft a defensive tackle this year? Give me a yes. Give me a no. You got 9 total picks. My answer on this one is a no. And I've been saying that the Raiders probably aren't going to draft a defensive tackle for, at least a few weeks, definitely since free agency has begun. But I said that because of the way that the roster construction ends up breaking down, and I could be wrong. The Raiders could end up going best player available, but based on their actions from the combine, from free agency, from signing Fotu today, I don't see this team going out and drafting a defensive tackle. That's just my 2 cents. So when you go through again, you look at a lot of the other moves that the Raiders have done, Trenches is very important. Trenches, or I'll call them pillar players. Alex Kappa, he is an offensive lineman. Trenches. Max Crosby, pillar player. Geno Smith, pillar player. Adam Butler, trenches. Jeremy Chin, somebody up near close to the line. Relationship with Dan Quinn. Malcolm Kuntz, trenches. Lonnie Johnson Jr., Marcus Robinson, Landon Roberts. He's a thumper up the middle, but he's got some of that captain status. Also great in terms of building a locker room. Eric Stokes loves to be able to add some competition. Raheem Mostert, Chip Kelly connection. Darnay Holmes, Patrick Graham connection. Every move that this Raiders team has made, they've done it, and they've done it as, yes, I'm adding a player, but they're also looking at the big picture. The real picture is this. Leki Fotu, though, is not a very good football player, and if he is asked to play very pivotal snaps for the Raiders, I think that one's going to come around and bite you in the butt. But maybe, yet again, Rob Leonard can save us, or Patrick Graham can save a defensive lineman and get the most out of him. Now, remember, y'all, you can always follow me on social media. I'm at Mitchell Renz 365 on Instagram and on Twitter. I'm putting out a lot of videos today and throughout the course of this week, so be on the lookout for that. But Leki Fotu has signed with the Las Vegas Raiders. We don't have any contract details out on it yet, but I would look at it as a intriguing move. And this is one thing that I actually have written down that I want to add. He is an Oakland guy. So maybe for that, we can bump up the grade just a little bit.